welcome to the last actually, Meditate and Make. This one we're going to be focusing on space. So I'm happy that you're here with me if you're joining in the live, and I'm happy that you're here with me if you're joining this in a replay or a video afterwards. It's the wonderful thing about this work is it can happen whenever we have intention and space and choose to cultivate that in our lives. So I'll just give people just a moment just to catch back up, catch in with the live that's happening here, and maybe just take this chance just to thank you for joining me for these 4 sessions here where we have been meditating and we've been making. My goal with these sessions really was just to help you see how simple it is for us to set the intention to just be with ourselves, be with our breaths, notice what's happening for us, and attune to that, if only for a few moments, and then to really allow that to spill over into the page. We've just been mostly working with drawing, with visual work, but of course we could let this spill into our movements. We could let this spill into, bringing objects together, collecting, those sorts of things, to the words that we use. Any form of expression would help us to take that mindful awareness and that paying attention and that noticing part of ourselves to our expression, where then we get to flex the muscles and try to let go of our judgments, notice our judgments, all of that sort of thing. So we've been breaking it down bit by bit each week here. We started with color, and then we went to line, and then we went to shape, and we're finally ending up with space. And so paying attention to each one of those kind of qualities of the visual world is helping us to really connect and slow down and attune to just one tiny thing. If you're anything like me, the world is very overwhelming, and it really helps to ground ourselves to just focus on one tiny little bit. So here we are today going to be focusing on space. It's 45 minutes. It will be very quick. It will feel like you just zoomed by. And of course, that's what happens when we notice and we slow down and we attune. We find that the world just kind of zooms. We could just kind of zoom in on it. So let's begin with the poem, and then I will walk us through our 10-minute meditation, and then we'll do 2 quick drawings. So if you want to join in right now, all you need is to have the intention to do this work, the time around 45 minutes, and to have your favorite color medium. I'm just going to be actually working with my Tombow marker today, and I've got a pencil on standby as well today. But if you have pastels or pencils or watercolor or ink or anything like that, you're welcome to just choose one color of those and work through the rest of that today together. So let's begin, as we have been, with a few words. And I have chosen some words for us here today by Sally Atkins, who's very well known in the expressive arts world. So, tell me, she said, what is the story you are telling? What wild song is singing itself through you? Listen. In the silence between, there is music. In the spaces between, there is a story. In the song that you're living now, it is the story of the place where you are. It contains the shapes of these old mountains, the green of the rhododendron leaves. It's happening right now in your breath, in the heartbeat still drumming this deeper rhythm. Beneath your cracking words, it matters what you did this morning and last, Saturday night and last year, not because you are important, but because you are in it, and it is still moving. We are all in this story together. Listen. In the silence between, there is music. In the spaces between, there is a story. Pay attention. We are listening each other into being. Those are words by Sally Atkins. So, of course, we're going to be listening to the space today here and paying attention to the space in between things here today. So that's our intention with this work in this moment for the next 40 minutes. So let's start by meditating. If wherever you are, it feels safe to close your eyes, do so. If at any time it doesn't feel safe to close your eyes, just go ahead and keep them open and just soften your gaze. Just take a few moments and just find your breath. Just tune in to the inflow and the outflow. Taking a few breaths, noticing the shift between the poem, whatever you were doing before, and where we are now. Feeling that subtle shift and that space between where we were before and where we are now. And just take a moment just to do a brief check-in. Check in with your emotions, with your sensations, with anything that is pulling your attention right now. Just do a little scan of your body and your mind. Maybe start from the top and just kind of work down and notice, how are you feeling and what sensations are you experiencing right now? How interesting. To just take a moment and check in with what we're feeling, to just recognize it. You don't need to do anything. You just need to notice what's going on for you. That little pain here, that feeling that's kind of perpetually still with you. Now, what I want to invite you to do is I want to invite you just to spend some time just breathing. And what I want you to notice, I want you to really notice the breath as it moves through the space from your nose or your mouth, whichever feels more comfortable for you, and into your lungs. I want you to see if you can feel into the space of your lungs. So let's just do that for about 10 breaths, just feeling the space in our lungs. You might feel like a rise and fall. You might have a temperature or sensation to it. Just noticing that space that's always there, always shifting. You may even want to place your hand on your chest to really connect with that space. And just noticing. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to think in any way or make anything happen. You're just noticing. And just extend your breath to just the broader plane of your being. Just see if you can notice just your body as a whole and the space of your body as it's occupying it. So shift your attention away from your breath, away from your lungs, and just see if you can just feel the space of your body. All the way from your toes, all the way up through your legs, your chest and your abdomen, down to your arms. Just feel that plane of your body and the space that you're taking right now. You might feel the edge of your body. You might feel where you end and the room and the space around you begins. Or that might be a little fuzzy. That's okay too. Just feeling your body as a whole, feeling the space that your body takes up. And if you find yourself distracted or thinking, that's okay, just notice that. And just bring yourself back to the space of noticing your body, noticing the space of your body. Now, I want to ask you to shift your attention from the space that your body is taking to just the space immediately around you. Just see if you can feel kind of some immediate space, not the whole room or anything, but just the edges around you. Just in your mind's eye, you might want to kind of bring that presence, that noticing to just the edge of you and where the space around you begins. You might almost feel like a boundary or an edge expanding outwards. And just feeling that immediate space around you. Now, just see if you can expand that just a little bit, maybe to the room that you're in or the space just further around you. Just notice that space. Notice what's happening in that space. There might be sounds, there might be temperatures, there might be sensations or feelings, but just notice that ever expanding boundary of yourself and then around the space around you. And just noticing the room where you're in, just almost bringing it to your mind's eye and just feeling through the space. And if your eyes are open, you can look at that space. If not, if your eyes are closed, just keep them closed and see if you can keep feeling the space, the sensation of space around you. And now just think about that space that you're in the context to the rest of the room that you're in, the house that you're in, the building that you're in. Just note that. Are you on a second or a third floor or way up high? Are there other spaces immediately around you? Halls, boundaries, windows? Just take a moment and just notice that. And just ever cast your thought, your gaze, your feeling of the space further and further as to wherever you are positioned in this space that you are, whether it's up high off the ground being held by a building or down close to the ground, and what's near you. Are there trees nearby? Are there neighbors? Is there people working busily all around you? Are there animals? Are there plants? Just what in that ever expanding boundary of space do you have around you? You can continue to go further if it feels right, or you can settle in one spot if that feels right. Just noting the space, paying attention to the space around you. And now maybe just starting to reverse that, bringing yourself back in closer and closer and closer, all the way to your breath and your lungs again, just in your own time. And just feeling yourself coming closer and closer and closer. Breathing back in. And so just check back in with yourself before you feel the temptation to open your eyes or begin to do our art exercise. Just check back in. How do you feel in this moment? Has there been a shift or a change from what you experienced before? Maybe it's the same, maybe something new showed up for you. Just noticing that. And just whenever it feels right in your own time, just take a breath and open your eyes and reconvene yourself with this space that's around you. Just feel that shift. Feeling the transition, holding a little bit on to that feeling and that sensation that you just had of space in your lungs and the outward, and bringing that intention to your page, to your paper, where we're going to continue to explore space. So I'll give you a moment just to gather your supplies, gather yourself, and just attune to your page. And what I want you to do is I want you just to pay attention to the space of your paper in front of you. Just the blank space, just noticing that. Noticing the boundary that's being held by the paper. The things that might be bleeding over from before or otherwise. But just noticing that we will be paying attention to just this little bit here, just this little part of our paper. And so when we attune ourselves to space, and as you just were attuning yourself to space, what's interesting about space is it's all about noticing boundaries or expanding boundaries as we start with our lungs and we move further out and out. In some ways, we start to realize how artificial boundaries are, but simultaneously realizing how real boundaries can be, the boundaries of our lungs, the boundaries of our body, but then feeling more connected and connected as we go outwards. So what I want to invite you to do is we're going to be working with frames and boundaries here for a little while. So this doesn't have to be precise, but I'm going to just kind of make a bit of a square here. And you can make a circle or otherwise. You can do a whole bunch at once. We're going to be working within these frames and kind of noticing the space within each of these frames. So I'm just going to start with 3, and then I'm going to make the rest of them on the fly, and you can watch along with me. So the first thing I want us to think about is I want us just to think about this new frame that we've made within our pages frame as a space, as an open space ready to be filled with something. And so I'm going to keep this very simple and probably continue to make a similar kind of shape, and probably just will work with lines, but you can choose to shake it up and follow your impulse. But what I want us to do is I want us just to first think about just filling the space in whatever way feels right. Just adding something to the space. And just noticing how the marks, almost looking at the negative space and the dark space or whatever color you're working with here too, but just noticing how we can almost bisect the space, take the space apart and shift it and change it. So just filling it without thought, just noticing it. And now what I want us to do is I want us to think about filling the space. Let's just do it from the top down. Just almost imagining something growing from the top and filling the space down. And we could think about crowding this space, having things very tightly placed within this space, leaving very little negative space behind. And I'm going to add a few more frames. Think about what if we offered something to this page, this paper, this frame that made it feel spacious, open. What if I thought about only filling the edges? The corners, perhaps. It doesn't really matter what we're doing to fill the space. It's a matter of just setting an intention to fill the space. Notice the space in between, the spaces that are left over, the white space, the dark space, the negative space. We could think about creating symmetry in the space. We could think about making incongruent changes to this space. We could think about something that would feel balanced. So in this way, shape and line are what we're using, and color, of course, as well too here, are what we're using to hold space almost, add space, notice space. We're just noticing the space of things. And so just give yourself some permission just to play with space as you continue to make frames. Just noticing in these kind of simple shapes about what happens when we add more, when we add less, about how the frame holds the space for us. Just gonna do a few more here. Challenge yourself to keep coming up with ways to notice the space. the space between things. Think about, as we had done before, thinking about spaciousness or density, those sorts of things, those words we use to describe space. We could think about how space might feel otherwise, though, right? So we could think about, if I have this frame here, I'm just making this up on the spot, but what would a sad space, how could I fill this space in a feeling that felt sad? Or joyful, or loving. And again, it doesn't have to make sense to the people around you. It's just a way to think about how space can take on a tone or a feeling, or how we can communicate and express ourselves through the language of space. How it's a tool we have, a resource we have to help us express ourselves. And just give ourselves a chance just to maybe do a few more. And then we'll move on to another activity. Let's do one more here. So interesting exercise to begin to attune yourself to the space in between, around, in the work that you're doing, and the various expressions that space can take. Almost like a warm-up activity to start to attune your mind. And of course, in mindfulness, we're always working towards noticing and just paying attention to particular things. So all we've done here is just paid attention to space. And in the past, we were just paying attention to line or to shape, or to color. And so when we are often working in visual arts, we are working with all of those things together. But if we start to break down the building blocks of expression and language and think about just how space can be something, it will change and help us shift about how we intentionally utilize those tools, just as it does when we just noticed our breath. Our relationship to our lungs just changed. Our relationship to the space around us just changed. Our relationship maybe even to our neighbors just changed. If you're anything like me, I live downtown. I live very urban, and although I feel very cocooned in my home, if I pay attention and think about how many people might be sleeping around me at any given moment, it kind of shifts my perspective, and it helps me kind of expand my boundaries around my belief around space. And the same thing happens when we're making art. If we start to notice space and we start to pay attention to the space in our creations, it will start to shift and change the relationship around how we use those to express. So in the last 15 minutes, I'm going to encourage us to move to another activity now that we are fully warmed up here. And so what I want to invite you to do is we're going to be, again, attuning to space, attuning to the negative space. When I say negative space, I mean the space that is, you can just look at my hand here. Instead of our eye and our brain, we're used to just noticing like the hand, right? But if we were start to notice the space in between the hands first, that would be attuning to the negative space around. And even just look at my hand or your own hand and just notice what happens when you almost shift your eyes from looking at the hand to noticing the space around the hand. That interesting kind of almost switch that flips in our brain as we switch to the space around something. It changes the way we see things. It changes our perspective. And so we're going to be working with our hand today, and we're going to be working with the space around our hand rather than the space of our hand, if that makes sense. So you're going to have to try to train your eye and your thought to kind of think this way. And so I want to encourage you, again, we did this early on, to maybe hold your pencil higher up, or your marker or whatever you're using, so that you don't find yourself getting really focused in and very tight. If you just for this exercise worked with your hand further up, a little less control, a little kind of more flow and movement, that will kind of help you focus more on the space rather than what you're doing or the execution of your lines or your marks. So you can choose to make frames as we did before, or you can choose to just kind of layer and put these kind of marks on the paper. And so I'm just going to demonstrate for you for the first one that we're going to do here. So you can do this in many different ways. So I'm just going to go and hold my hand in some interesting kind of way. And I'm going to just notice the space around in between my hands here. So I can see this. And so my hand is very high up here, and I'm not worrying about making great marks or precise marks. I'm noticing the space in between these marks, and I'm just going to fill them in. And so this isn't going to look like your hand, although it might if you've done this kind of work before. I'm spending more time looking at my hand than I am at the marks that I'm making. And I'm working to like attune my brain to the marks around rather than my hand. So you can see it doesn't really look like my hand, does it? But it's the negative space around my hand. And it's not very precise either, because I'm holding my hand back and working. I'm going to move my hand in another direction here. And I'm just going to keep my gaze on that space in between. You might notice your brain kind of wanting to flip. That's very normal. We're very accustomed to looking at the object rather than the space around the object. And so we're just going to kind of shift our hands in various directions. If you didn't want to do this with your hands, you could also do this with just an object. Like I don't know, like some ink or something. You could move an ink bottle or something, like an object that you have on your desk, in different directions and just kind of explore it. Kind of lose my position in my hand so you can see the positions here. So how interesting to notice your brain trying to make that flip. It can feel very, very uncomfortable at first. If any of you have ever done any of the drawing from the right side of the brain work or that sort of stuff, this is very much in line with that sort of thing where you're trying to train your gaze to be more about, yes, the space in between, the lines of objects, more about the thinking brain wants to name this as a hand held in this shape, and this is the part of the finger and my knuckles. And in the right side of the brain, we're thinking about the object as a whole, as line and shape, and kind of almost very like what we're doing here: shape, line, space, color, that sort of thing. Feeling really interested in just kind of the shadowy marks that are happening with mine, and kind of going back through and offering some smoothness to this, because I can see that my little hand shadow puppets are going to be quite intriguing once they all come together. Even as we place our marks on the page, we can change our perspective around space, where we can layer things up. We don't have to have, a clean piece of paper for everything. Why not crowd it? Why not have them all kind of working in the same area? Why not have them overlap in space? Each take of our hands, each moment, kind of connected to the next one. And so one of the things for me about practicing making in this way is there's so much opportunity, first of all, to observe ourselves. So noticing if you're thinking like, oh, I'm doing this wrong, or why does hers look different than mine, or, all those stories that start to show up for yourself. This is just one other spot in our lives where we can practice that noticing and that observing of all that mental chatter and how it impacts ourselves. So if you are noticing yourself thinking, feeling frustrated, just bring some curiosity to that. Just bring some compassion and some curiosity to that, because our art making is a chance for us to notice ourselves. It's almost like a microscope for us to kind of look at ourselves and put ourselves in uncomfortable situations and observe what happens when we're trying something new, when we think, and notice all that mental chatter that might begin to kind of bubble up for us. And then also, there is so much metaphor and symbolism sometimes that shows up, and the sense making that shows up. So as we kind of start to notice the space around us, and as we noticed our lungs and the space around us too, and I bring this to the page, I just notice how the perspective really changes on things for me. How when I choose to intentionally look at things in a different way, I understand them differently. And for me, that feels really wise. That feels like something I need to be doing in my life more often, is changing my perspective of things and viewing things in a different way. Instead of looking at my hand, seeing it as a hand, thinking of it as a hand, to look at it and the space around my hand and think about, how does my relationship to my hand change when I begin to view it a different way? And how might I do that in my relationships and in my own life and in my work? Am I used to kind of looking at something a specific way, and it might be time to kind of really start looking at what's happening around rather than the thing that is? If I have a conflict or an issue happening, how can I bring some intention to observing what's happening around that conflict? Observing the space, yes, the space that that conflict is holding in my life, but the observation of the space around it. And so for me, that's where mindfulness and practicing in this way really offers me a chance to just push the pause button, get very intentional, and then see what I find and then bring it back into my life. Go back into my life and think about, how will I change the way I view my children? What am I observing when I see my children every day? Am I observing them as the hand, or am I observing the space around the hand? And so, in just a few minutes, I'm going to go downstairs and I will see my children, and I have an opportunity to let this experience here spill over into the page that way. So I have an impulse right now. The marker that I have is a water marker, and I have filled my page, and I'm going to actually just take the chance to kind of paint this and see what happens when I blur some of these pieces together. You're welcome to keep shifting your object, whether it's your hand or something else. And if you have a bit of time and space, maybe you want to shift away from your hand to something else. Even as I'm doing this, I'm feeling how I've added water, and I see all these blurring boundaries. Kind of artificial thing I was already playing with around space and what is me and what isn't me, and where my hand begins and where it doesn't. I'm already watching that shift and kind of just melt away. And that's I don't know for you, but for me, that's the experience I often have in the meditation when I feel the space, is I feel myself connecting more to what's happening around me. I feel myself more connected to the space around me. Somehow, by noticing space and boundaries and what is and what isn't, I feel myself more connected. And as I live my life more in that way too, as I hold boundaries with myself or whatever, I start to realize that I used to think that holding boundaries was actually about distance, but I can see now, I'm starting to see now, about how holding boundaries is actually a way to show more connection, more reverence, more love. It further entrenches you to the person, the place, the thing. Look at this thing I just created from my hands. What a surprise. That was very fun. So I'll give you just a few more minutes. We're at the end of our time already, if you can believe it, but you're welcome to continue on and looking at that negative space and continuing to think about the wisdom that it has for you in your life. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for watching these sessions, participating in these sessions whenever you are, whether it's live or otherwise. You're always welcome to share your creations with me, or your wisdom or your insight or whatever with me. And I hope that as you continue to create in this way, and maybe just even start to build in the practice of maybe a 5 to 10 minute meditation, whether it's a guided meditation on your phone or just, setting the intention just to notice just your breath or the space around you or the colors around you or whatever it is around you, and using that as an invitation and almost a ceremony and a practice to begin to start your creative work that you do. So thanks for coming on this little journey of just a touch of mindfulness and art making and bringing the two of them together. I'm always filled with such deep gratitude for you trusting me and letting me kind of take you on these journeys, because I know they're so unexpected and so it takes a lot of bravery and a lot of courage. So thanks so much. And I will look forward to seeing your creations and connecting with you all down the line, everyone.